cool. Why don't we move into this next one? So this person asks, can anyone tell me the proper way of using a credit card? In the past, I've used a credit card for big purchases and would pay them down over time. But the problem is the bills stack up and I either forget I had them or I don't focus on it as much as I should. Do people use credit cards for daily purchases, then pay them off each paycheck? Do you put all of your subscriptions on them and then handle it? What is the best method for handling credit cards in the day-to-day?
I love this question too, because it's also like, where did this come from? Where have we been led astray on credit card use? You know, people putting their emergencies on there, people putting this big purchase that they're going to pay off later on there. I'm not sure where all this information is coming from, but I've also heard these things as well. You know, I think where people go wrong, they think that credit cards are just this magic amount of money that we can just spend. And then, you know, someday in the future, we'll get enough money to pay it off. That never comes, right? The same bills are still coming in. You're still putting more things on your credit card. And then by the time you realize that you have, you know, maybe $10,000 on your credit card and it's continuing to spiral upward because of the interest on it, right? So we need to start thinking about our credit card like a debit card. And that's something I learned early on in my life. You know, my mom, she didn't make a lot of money, but we only spent the money that we had. We never used credit cards. We never had maxed out credit cards, things like that. But you know, you're only buying things on your credit card that you have the money to pay for in your bank account, or you know, when you're getting paid at your next pay date. You know, I personally use my credit card for almost everything in my life. There's a few things that, you know, you have to have your automatic debit card set up with, and then I just pay it off each month. That's how you should be using a credit card, especially if you want to build credit as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that, like, this is my card for emergencies. Yep. And like, putting emergencies on a credit card is just, it's one of those things that's going to put you in the cycle of, I had to put this huge expense on a card and I'm going to pay it off in the future. And then like you said, when the future comes, you're focusing on the bills you have at that moment. And you almost never catch up to be able to pay off the expenses from the past. And, you know, like you said, like the best way to use a credit card is to treat it like a debit card. And that means only putting expenses on that card that you can actually afford to pay. Like if you don't have the money in your bank account, you don't have enough money to be putting this on a credit card, because you're just gonna have to pay it in the future. And if you don't, you're gonna owe more than what you put on it. But, you know, I always tell people that using a credit card, I think it really works best when you combine it with a really good budget, because if you're budgeting appropriately, right, you know exactly how much money you have to spend, you know that you have the money to actually spend it. And then whether you put it on a debit card or a credit card, like at that point, it doesn't make a difference because you have the money to back it up. And then if you're keeping up to date with like tracking your expenses and all that, then you know you're never going to go over what you should be spending, meaning that you won't have the money to pay it down. But yeah, I feel like too many people just treat the credit card like you said, it's just like this magic source of money, and you can kind of deal with it later. And I think the confusing part too is that like from the time that you put an expense on the card, you can have as much as 2 months to get that thing paid off, right? Because at the end of the first month, you have your statement date. And then a month later from that, you have the actual due date of what your balance is. And so you have a lot of time to not focus on paying that card off. And I think that's where people kind of fall behind, because, you know, life happens, you continue to put expenses on it. And while you're focusing on the now, it's hard to focus your extra money towards paying off things of the past.
Yeah. And like you said, if you don't keep like a budget and track your expenses with it, it's very hard for it, or it's very easy for it to get out of control. Like this person mentioned, you know, they forgot about it, or, you know, they focused on something else. That's exactly why people fall into this trap, you know, and not paying them off in a timely manner. Now, you know, she mentions like, or whoever this is mentions, you know, how should you go about this? Should you put your subscriptions on them? Should you use them for daily purchases? I think if you don't have a budget yet, you know, that's definitely something you need to start with. But if you don't have a budget yet, I think you could start with a credit card and use it for specific things. Like there's people I know out there who use it specifically for gas, or specifically for those subscriptions that are auto drafted each month or whatever. That might be a good way to like flex that muscle, so you're not putting all of your expenses and like overwhelming yourself and overspending. And then maybe just practice paying those off, you know, like maybe at the 15th of the month, take a look at your subscriptions that came out, go ahead and pay those off. You know what I mean? And just start really small so that you can get that, get in that trend of like, okay, this money that I have in my account is just going to pay off the stuff that's on my credit card. The credit card is not some sort of magical money. It's just what I'm using to pay for this service that I was already going to pay for. Right. So I think that that's somewhere that people can start if they haven't really gotten into the credit card game of how to use it correctly. But if you are new to this, like I said, try that. But if you know that you're going to overspend, I personally don't even recommend using a credit card right now until you can get down how to use one appropriately.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I would say that like the average American probably shouldn't be using a credit card. And like I think that's why like Dave Ramsey's whole like anti-credit card thing, I think that's why it's so popular and it works for so many people is because the average person like doesn't have the habits in place, the consistency in place, the budget in place to be using a credit card and keeping track of it. Right now, I do think like if you can manage your finances responsibly, then you should absolutely take advantage of a credit card because, it does add a layer of complexity to how you manage your finances. But like, in my opinion, like I do think it's worth it if you can do it the right way, right? Like making sure that you're keeping on track with your budget, you're paying it off in time. And then like, it really is like another way to get free rewards, like whether that's airline miles or gift cards or points towards like whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, like you said, you can really put it as many or as few expenses on the credit card, right? Yeah. Like if you're not trying to optimize for points, then the only thing you need to do is just show that you have some activity on that card month to month, and your cards are going to stay open. Over time, you're going to get credit limit increases. Like your score is going to go up as long as you can show that you're using it responsibly. But I don't think most people need to start with putting everything on a card. I think that's something you can kind of work to as you build up the habits. Because where I'm at today, like you said, everything goes on a card for me because I want to try to get as many like airline miles as I can out of that card. But I know that money's just sitting in my checking account, just waiting to pay it off at the end of the month. Like there's no question for me on if I have enough money to pay for something when I put it on a card,
Yeah, something that you mentioned that I hear a lot, I'm trying to optimize my points or to get these miles, but then they carry a balance over and they're paying 29% interest. And I'm like, yeah, you're not doing anything actually. So, so I think we need to stop with that until we can, use them appropriately. When I'm working with somebody and they're paying off credit card debt, the first thing that I recommend, of course, they can do what they want, but I say, stop using their credit cards. You really have proven to yourself that you can't use them. It's only hurting you. So stop using them until you can get in the habit of, okay, I'm using my debit card because on my debit card, this is the money I have. Once you pay off your credit card debt and then you're using your debit card in a manner like that, then you can maybe transition back to a few things on your credit card, show yourself you can pay it off every month, and then maybe you can start transitioning everything to there. But yeah, I've told so many people, if you can't do that, then don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal to use a credit card. I'd rather you not have 29% interest on these balances that you're carrying,
Yeah, 100%. Like so many people say like, I want to get the points, but like any amount of debt that you put on the card is going to completely outweigh the amount of points that you might, potentially be getting from it. And like even some of the best cards like could have as much as like maybe like 2 to 4% cash back. And it's like, if you're getting charged a 29% interest rate on your debt, like there's no way to like, to make the spread there, right? Like if you're carrying any form of debt, like it's better for you, like you said, to just cut up those cards in the meantime. Like you can still keep the accounts open, but like physically remove them from your wallet, digitally remove them from your wallets, and wait until you have like the right habits in place. You got on a budget, like how to manage your money, because then using a credit card is so much easier, right? Like then it doesn't matter what expenses you put on it or don't put on it because you have the money to pay for it.
The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.